Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions that I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author, and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Today, I will be reviewing the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This is the first book in the Sunbearer Duology. It is a fantasy novel. The description says, as each new decade begins, the sun's power must be replenished so that Sol can keep traveling the sky and keep the chaotic obsidian gods at bay. Sol selects 10 of the most worthy semidioses to compete in the Sunbearer Trials. The winner carries light and life to all the temples of Reino del Sol, but the loser has the greatest honor of all. They will be sacrificed to Sol, their body melted down to refuel the sunstones, protecting the world for another 10 years. Teo, a 17-year-old jade semidios and the trans son of the goddess of birds, isn't worried about the trials. At least, not for himself. His best friend Nia is a gold semidios and a shoo-in for the trials, and while he trusts her abilities, the odds of becoming the sacrifice is 1 in 10. But then, for the first time in over a century, the impossible happens. Sol chooses not 1, but 2 jade competitors, Teo and Shio, the 13-year-old child of the god of bad luck. Now they must compete in 5 trials against gold opponents who are more powerful and better trained. Worst of all, Teo's annoyingly handsome ex-best friend and famous semidios hero, Aurelio, is favored to win. Teo is determined to get himself and his friends through the trials unscathed for fame, glory, and their own survival. At the moment, I'm calling this 4 stars, but definitely a high 4 stars, bordering 5. This is actually one of the problems with my rating system, because 5 stars can be tricky to determine. Not always, of course. Some stories hit all my buttons so perfectly that I just know. But a lot of times, like with the Expanse series, or quite possibly this book, I need to sit with it for a while, or even read it again, before I can be sure just how much I really like it. For the Sunbearer Trials, I think how I feel about it will ultimately depend a fair amount on how Celestial Monsters goes, but it's certainly got good prospects. At any rate, this is my book club book for October, and it turned out to be one of about 4 books we've read that I actually liked. The overall plot of this book is extremely predictable. If you're a person who doesn't like a book you can see where it's going, you won't like this. As soon as I understood the basic setup of the world, something I would have known before starting if I'd read that description, I knew how it would end. Well, that's not entirely true. I had 2 theories on how it would end, and aside from one detail I was wrong about, the more likely of the 2 was right on the money. That sort of thing doesn't bother me, though. Sure, it's nice to be surprised, but knowing how it ends is only a problem for me if the ending is terrible. The point of any book is how we get there, and the characters we get to know along the way. The characters in this book are great. Teo is a charismatic protagonist with a strong sense of justice and unflinching determination. He's certainly not perfect, getting easily caught up in things and occasionally losing sight of what he's supposed to be doing, but he's still a character that's fun to read about. I'm honestly a little sad this is only a duology. His friends, Shio and Nia, are also fairly likable. Nia is the dumb jock type that isn't generally my favorite, but she's the over-friendly sort of jock that's a little endearing. Shio is just a sad, scared little bean, and you desperately hope that he'll be okay, while simultaneously feeling certain that he won't. Aurelio, despite being seen as the ultimate hero by Teo and the people of Reino del Sol, also comes across as someone in over his head a lot of the time. I really loved the way the story developed him as it progressed. The rest of the cast doesn't really get as much focus, but they still get enough that it wasn't hard to keep all 10 competitors straight. Additionally, despite a couple of characters being more arrogant and antagonistic, Thomas still takes time to show that they're still people with things that are important to them and a softer side. Then there's the plot, which is also pretty great. It consists almost entirely of the 5 trials, with small interludes between to better develop the characters, their relationships, and the world as a whole. While a couple of the trials are what you'd generally expect in this kind of competition, some of them are fairly unique and interesting. It's helped that we establish early that the scores aren't determined in as straightforward a manner as one might expect, and the reader has the opportunity to guess what things might be more important in the rest of the trials, and how Teo might raise his standing. All in all, this is a great book. I would 100% recommend it. That's all I have to say without spoilers. If you don't like spoilers, now is the time to pause or close the video. For everyone else, let's talk details. Like I said, the end of this book is exceedingly predictable. It's pretty obvious right away that Teo is going to win the trials and then refuse to kill the loser, which is exactly what happens. I did think that Shio would be the one being sacrificed, which wasn't the case, though he was certainly supposed to be. Instead, Aurelio's sister Oristella falls into last place with the final trial, and it's her head on the chopping block. Honestly, I kind of like this outcome better. Shio is barely old enough to be in these trials, and they already select people who are way too young for this kind of responsibility, so Teo deciding that he won't kill him would have been kind of an easy call. Oristella, on the other hand, has been one of the biggest bullies throughout the book, and even attacked Teo at one point, though that wasn't really her fault. Teo deciding that she doesn't deserve to die shows his strength of character much more strongly. Then, of course, everything goes to shit as the Obsidian gods are freed, and it turns out Shio is actually one of their kids. This isn't really much of a surprise by the time it's revealed, although Thomas takes steps to blur the lines and make it a little less certain. I definitely felt pretty iffy about whether it was him or his supposed father that was the problem before we got the actual reveal. I am, however, infinitely curious to find out how exactly he came to exist and why Mala Suerte was helping him and the Obsidians. I do still kind of prefer my option B ending, but I do kind of understand why it isn't entirely feasible in this particular setting. See, it always kind of bothers me in these competitions where someone will for sure die that we're following a person who is supposed to be heroic, but who is still fighting to make sure that someone is anyone else. This is equally solved by Teo refusing to sacrifice the loser, but my alternate theory for how the book might end was that Teo would actively throw the competition, choose not to participate in any meaningful way, and thereby become the sacrifice. Instead, Aurelio would become the Sunbearer and have to kill Teo. Part of the reason I think I would have preferred this is that it would have been a really good culmination to both of their arcs. Aurelio used to be friends with Teo, but succumbed to peer and parental pressure and snubbed him for being a Jade. Throughout the story, there are small moments where he clearly wants to come to Teo's defense or help him in some way, but stops just shy of doing anything that his sister, or really his mother, will judge him for. As the story progresses and his relationship with Teo is slowly rebuilt, he begins to step a little bit further over that line. The reasons both he and Oristella are trying so hard to make Aurelio the Sunbearer is because he's got an unusual flaw of sorts that makes his abusive mother view him as unworthy. They both think that if he becomes the Sunbearer, she'll finally acknowledge his worth. So having him do that, achieve his goal, and essentially prove himself, but then choose Teo instead of Glory, would have been extremely satisfying. Still, even if I would have liked that better, I'm not dissatisfied with the way the book did end. By sheer coincidence, BookBub informed me that this was on sale like a week after I read it, and you can bet I snatched it up in a hurry. I'm definitely going to read it again at some point. Honestly, I kind of just want to read it again now, which makes me think I really should give it the 5 stars. I'll also be reading Celestial Monsters at some point. Unfortunately, the library gods have not smiled upon me. My library only has 1 copy of this, and it's popular enough that when I put the hold in, it estimated 14 weeks. I do still have emergency book money from last Christmas sitting on Amazon, so it's possible I'll give in and buy it before then, but I'm trying to resist temptation. That's all I have to say about the Sunbearer Trials. If you like this video, I hope you'll watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye!